At a brunch in the heart of New Orleans, my mother raised her mimosa glass and smirked. "If it weren't for pity, do you really think anyone would have invited you here?" It wasn't said to amuse, and it certainly wasn't meant to build closeness. It landed like a calculated blow, sharp enough to sting, but subtle enough that no one could call her out on it. My aunt slowly sipped her drink without looking at me and added, as if bestowing a favor, "Let her feel important for a change." Suddenly, the dining table felt more like a stage. They were seasoned performers in familiar roles: the sharp-tongued mother, the detached aunt, the joking brother, and me, the only one in the room without a speaking part. I sat there, holding my coffee cup like it was the only thing tethering me to the moment, smiling when appropriate, nodding at the right times, as if I didn't exist. But I heard everything. Loud and clear. "Welcome to Family Ashes, where family secrets are laid bare, and the truth has nowhere left to hide." Have you ever sat among people who call themselves your family, but deep down felt like an outsider? They need you when the bills are due, when their accounts are in the red, when they want to look successful without paying the price. But when you sit there, quiet, tired, hoping for just one kind glance, they turn you into the joke. The wounded one, who must pretend not to hurt, because if you speak up, you're too sensitive. Suddenly, you're the problem. Not them. So what do you do in a family like that, where affection always comes with a receipt, and love is reserved for those who know how to stay silent? Stay until the end. Because some rebellions don't come with shouting, or revenge. Sometimes, it only takes one person deciding to loosen their grip on the chain that everyone thought they'd hold forever. My name is Rachel Monroe. I'm 35 years old. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in Houston, Texas, and I work as a forensic accountant for a private firm that specializes in messy financials, hidden expenses, neglected tax filings, numbers so small they seem harmless until they quietly tank a company. The job requires precision, logic, and a lot of patience. Funny thing is, none of those skills ever helped me when it came to my own family. Because in my family, logic never beats emotion. And fairness? That's a foreign concept they only bring up when they're the ones on the losing side. My family's scattered. Some live in Baton Rouge, others in Jackson, a few in Lafayette. But geography has never stood in the way of the invisible web that connects them and traps me. They're the kind of family where, if you ask who's covering this, you'll get silence. But if someone says Rachel's got it, everyone nods. No one objects. No one even flinches. Because for as long as I can remember, I've been the stable one. And stability, in our family, meant responsibility. And responsibility always meant me. I buy my mother's plane tickets every holiday, because she's too old to figure out online booking. I book hotels for my aunt when she visits Houston, because you're closer, dear. I let Jack, my older brother, borrow my credit card to book an anniversary trip with his girlfriend, because he'll pay me back right after his bonus hits. The bonus never came. The money didn't either. And me? I never asked for it back. I got used to being the fallback plan, the backup wallet, the uncredited sponsor. At first it was a few $100s. Then a few thousand. Eventually, it was entire chapters of my life. I used to think that if I gave enough, for long enough, maybe one day they'd see me differently. That I'd become an essential part of the family, instead of just her, the odd sister, single, living alone, seemingly successful but with a job no one really understood. I spent years clinging to that fragile hope. That affection could be bought through devotion. That love could be built on obligation. But the more I gave, the more I learned: when you're the only one taking responsibility, you'll also be the only one to blame when things fall apart. And then there was the cabin at Caddo Lake. A place that used to be the backdrop for our so-called family memories, where everyone would gather during sweltering summers, grilling in the backyard, blasting music, letting kids run wild across the grass. A place they all called ours, a shared family property. But the name on the deed? It was only mine. Because in 2009, when my father was about to lose the cabin to foreclosure after defaulting on a bank loan, I was the only one with a credit score good enough to co-sign. I signed. No one thanked me. They just said, "Good. We got to keep it." Since then, every maintenance fee, repair, insurance payment, and property tax has come out of my pocket. I paid each bill like I was paying the utilities on my own apartment. And yet they never asked. They came to the cabin like it was their God-given right. They ordered food, left trash behind, forgot to turn off the air conditioning when they left. Some even let their friends borrow the place without telling me. And me, the one who saved it from being repossessed, who rehung the photos on the walls, who shoveled the snow every winter, I never once got a check-in call. I lived like that for too long. Thinking I was doing the right thing. That if I didn't step up, no one would. But the truth is, they never needed me to do it. They just needed me to take it. And I did. Until that day at Brunch in New Orleans, when my mother raised her mimosa, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "If it weren't for pity, do you really think anyone would have invited you here?" That was the moment I realized I was never truly a part of them. I was a convenience. And that wasn't going to change unless I changed it first. That brunch was held at a French restaurant right in the middle of the Garden District, the kind that only serves seasonal eggs Benedict, folds napkins into swans, and charges 3 times what Starbucks does for a cup of coffee, but no one complains because it has ambience. My aunt picked the place because it photographs well. My mother wore a full pastel suit like she was headed to a charity luncheon, and Jack, my brother, showed up 10 minutes late, laughing loudly like the world had been waiting for him to arrive. I wore a beige linen dress. Simple, clean, nothing attention-grabbing. I knew how their game worked. The person who draws the least attention is least likely to be attacked. But that day, I miscalculated. The moment I pulled out the chair, the only one without a name card, I noticed, Jack looked me up and down and laughed like he'd just seen something hilarious. "God, you look like you just crawled out of a donation bin behind a church." No one pushed back. My mother didn't even lift her eyes from her mimosa, though the smile curling at the corner of her mouth gave her away. My aunt coughed into her drink like she was stifling a laugh, then sipped again. I sat there, expressionless, smiling like I hadn't heard a thing. That was a skill I'd perfected over the years, staying silent at the right time, nodding in the right places, being agreeable without ever seeming grateful. I used to believe that if I reacted, I'd be the one ruining the mood, the overly sensitive one. So I didn't react. But this time, something was different. I didn't feel hurt the way I used to. I didn't feel sad or humiliated. I just felt cold. For the first time in many years, I didn't feel the need to forgive. I didn't feel the need to explain or remind myself they didn't mean it. I sat there, sipping lukewarm coffee, and in my head, I started quietly mapping out what would happen next. I no longer wanted to endure just to keep the peace. And I knew, with more certainty than I'd felt in years, that would be the last time I sat in the nameless chair. That night, I got home earlier than usual. I didn't stop by the grocery store. I didn't pull into the coffee shop I usually went to for a second cup. I didn't even turn on the radio during the drive back. I just sat in my car for a while, staring at the pale yellow light spilling from my apartment balcony, before finally stepping out. Everything inside was exactly where it should be, neat, orderly, like always, but for the first time, it didn't feel peaceful. It felt empty in a way I hadn't known before. Not sad. Just a strange kind of silence that follows a decision you've already made, even if you haven't said it out loud yet. I set my bag down, brewed a cup of peppermint tea, no sugar, and opened my laptop. My fingers typed with decisiveness, no hesitation. The subject line was only 2 words, "Ready now." The recipient was Jared, the lawyer I had worked with back in 2009 during my father's property ordeal. I didn't need to explain anything. We had discussed selling the cabin a few times before, but I always hesitated. Always said, it's not the right time. That night, the hesitation was gone. As I hit send, I knew with absolute certainty, this time, it was real. Immediately after, I logged into the banking portal. The family credit account, the so-called credit pool that I had created and managed for years to conveniently handle shared expenses, was the next thing I would shut down. I reviewed every item, who had authorization, which automatic payments were still running, what cards were linked. I removed them one by one, like I was unhooking the last chains keeping me bound. My hands didn't shake. It felt like tidying up a room I had once been attached to, but now knew it was time to leave. Lastly, I opened the legal docs folder on my hard drive, the place I kept copies of contracts, the cabin's ownership certificate, and all maintenance invoices from over a decade. Every single one was in my name. Not a cent had come from anyone else in the family. They only called it our family cabin when they wanted to use it. I pulled up the blank sale contract Jared had sent me months ago, saved a new copy, and titled it, Cato_sell_final. When I closed my laptop, it was past midnight. The city outside was still buzzing, but inside my apartment, everything was unnaturally quiet. I took the final sip of tea, the mint still faintly warm, and thought, maybe for the first time in years, I had made a choice purely for myself. Not because someone needed me, but because I no longer wanted to live like the emergency contact for people who never thought to call back once they were okay. I didn't make a scene. I didn't tell anyone I was preparing to pull out of the system they always called the shared fund, even though they never shared the responsibility. I didn't send an email, didn't drop a note in the group chat, didn't leave any hints. I just sat down, opened my laptop, and started untangling the threads they had knotted around me over the years. I opened the account dashboard, logged into the credit account I had always used to help the family when needed, a gentle phrase for a responsibility that never ended. I saw the long list of active authorized users, my mother, Jack, and Eleanor. Each one had their own way of using it, their own brand of justification, but none had ever asked if I was still okay footing the bill. My mother used it for utilities, claiming she was too old to learn online banking. Jack used it for image-building investments, which meant clothes, alcohol, bars, and occasionally hotels for his new girlfriends. My aunt used it less, but still regularly ordered Amazon packages to the cabin, always saying, "I'll transfer you later," even though she never did. I had lived in that gray area too long. In the beginning, I tracked every transaction, made spreadsheets, took screenshots of receipts and sent them to the group, waiting for someone to reply. Eventually, I stopped sending, stopped asking. Because I realized they hadn't forgotten. They just never felt obligated to pay it back. In their eyes, I was the one with money, with no dependents, who should help if she can. They loved repeating the phrase blood should support blood. But I started to realize, support doesn't mean being stepped on. I removed each person from the account. Each time, the system asked, "Are you sure you want to revoke access?" I was sure. More than I'd ever been. Even though a small part of me trembled, as if I was doing something wrong, as if standing up for myself would earn me the label selfish. But I knew, if I kept going like this, I'd be selfish toward myself. Once I finished with the credit account, I turned to the cabin. I opened my expense tracker, where I had logged every single bill for over 10 years, electricity, water, insurance, lawn care, regular cleaning. Small things, sure, but together, they added up to thousands of dollars each year. I remembered every summer when they'd flock to the cabin, laugh, eat, drink, then leave me with the mess and a pile of unpaid invoices. No one ever asked, "What's the electricity bill this month?" They only asked, "Where's the key to the cabin?" I stopped everything. One item at a time. No renewals. No more payments. I knew the cabin wouldn't fall apart overnight. But just a few weeks without handling the bills and the system would begin shutting things down, the electricity would be cut, the water turned off, and the insurance company would start sending warnings. And if someone decided to spend a weekend there, they'd find a dark, cold house, with grass grown up to their knees. No one ever remembered the person who quietly kept it clean, safe, and running, until that person was no longer there. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't even feel sad. It was like pulling off an old bandage from a wound that had already healed. There was no pain, but a dull ache remained, the kind that makes you realize just how long you've left something clinging to you that should have been let go a long time ago. I didn't give anyone a heads up because I knew, if I said something, they would call it a misunderstanding. They'd laugh it off, send emojis, or worse, pretend to be sorry just enough to make me soften again. They'd done it for years, and I had always fallen for it. But not this time. This time, I wanted to let silence be the witness to my choice. No warnings. No explanations. No negotiations. I waited. Not because I wanted them to suffer. I just wanted to see what would be the first thing to collapse once I pulled my hand away from the system they believed I would always hold up. Jack's card at the bar? The unpaid electric bill? A cabin reservation that couldn't be confirmed? I didn't know. And I didn't need to. Because for the first time in many years, I did something I never thought I'd be brave enough to do. I let go. And I wasn't reaching back. It took exactly 2 weeks. 14 days since I quietly untied every link, canceled every payment, and stepped away from the financial web I had been knotted into, like it was some unwritten part of being the good daughter or the reliable little sister. I didn't count the days, but I remember clearly the morning things started to unravel. The first message came from Jack. One short, blunt line, no greeting. Why isn't my card working? I stared at the screen. Didn't reply. 10 minutes later, another one, I'm in Vegas, don't tell me you shut it down? Then came the calls. 3 in a row. I let them ring and then powered off my phone. Not out of anger. But because I had heard enough. By the afternoon, my mother sent a string of messages. At first, she sounded composed, the power at my place got shut off. Is there an issue with the payment system? Then, the banking app says declined. I don't know how to fix this. And finally, like always, can you take a look for me? But this time, I wasn't the one who takes a look. I flipped the phone face down on the table, poured myself another glass of water, and sat in silence. The next day, the family group chat lit up. My aunt sent a photo of the cabin, overgrown porch, front yard grass up to her knees, the porch light off. Rachel, is something going on? My dad chimed in, asking why the insurance had lapsed, why the cabin had been flagged as high risk. I knew then they were beginning to feel the space I had left behind. Not because they missed me. But because they needed me. I didn't reply. Didn't say a word. Didn't point out that everything unraveling now was just the direct result of a decision they never believed I had the guts to make. I muted the chat notifications, set my phone aside, and opened my map app. Caddo Lake was about a 4-hour drive from Houston. I knew the route like the back of my hand, every rest stop, every bend, every tree-lined road leading into the cabin. But this time, the drive had a different purpose. I wasn't going to check in, fix something, or prep for someone else's weekend escape. This time, I was going to say goodbye. I arrived early in the morning, when the mist still clung to the surface of the lake and the air carried the damp smell of decaying grass. The cabin looked much the same as the last time I was there, the same familiar wooden porch, the white-painted window frames now peeling from age, the old swing still showing burn marks from when Jack got carried away with fireworks. But there was something different in the air. No more anticipation. Just a quiet emptiness, like the house itself knew its time was up. I stepped inside and turned on the lights, the bulbs still flickered to life, even though I knew the next utility bill wouldn't be paid. I walked a slow lap through the cabin, my hand brushing over the wooden table I had spent 3 full days sanding and refinishing years ago. I looked up at the wall where the family photos hung, a row of old frames, my parents smiling with their arms around each other, Jack giving me a piggyback ride when we were kids, the whole family standing proudly in front of the cabin that first summer after I'd saved it. I stared at them for a long time. Then, I lifted my hand and started taking them down. Not rushed, not harshly. One by one. Carefully, deliberately. Like I was taking down parts of a past I no longer wanted to display. I placed every photo into a small wooden box, sealed it shut, and wrote across the lid with a marker, family, what it used to be. Not to throw it away. Just to put it away. Because I knew what I needed to keep was the lesson, not the evidence. That afternoon, I sat at the desk near the window, where sunlight filtered through the trees and scattered soft patches of light across the floor. I opened my laptop and typed up an email to Jared, my attorney. The subject line was simple, go ahead. I attached every document he needed to begin the formal listing of the cabin. I instructed him to keep it quiet, no public posting until the legal paperwork was complete, no digital breadcrumbs for my family to follow. When I clicked send, I didn't feel regret. I felt clarity, crisp, quiet clarity that I had never known before. This cabin had once felt like a place I might stay connected to for the rest of my life. But now I understood, it was just a house. And no house is worth holding on to if it's the only thing tying you to people who don't know how to love. I hadn't intended to ask for the money back. Honestly. For years, I told myself it wasn't worth the drama, not worth breaking what little peace we had left. I trained myself to let it go, to turn unpaid loans into gifts, to believe that preserving harmony was more important than fairness. But then something shifts. Not because the dollar amount is too high, but because the feeling of being taken for granted has dug too deep. That night, I sat at my desk, the glow of the laptop screen casting light on a mug of tea gone cold. I opened a new spreadsheet and typed in one number, $4,000. I didn't need to check old invoices or cross-reference accounts. I remembered the day Jack called me all too well, his voice shaky, saying he was about to be sued for insurance fraud. I remembered driving through pounding rain to meet with a lawyer on his behalf, remembered every email I sent, every phone call I made, every time I exhaled hard because I was cleaning up a mess that wasn't mine. I even remembered his weak handshake afterward, and the vague promise, I'll pay you back within a month. That was 16 months ago. No follow-up. No check. No text. Nothing. I added a few more lines to the spreadsheet. Outstanding balance, $4,000. Due date, July 31st. No extensions. No discussion. No negotiation. I attached the file to an email. Subject, final reminder. I sent it to Jack. Then I forwarded it to my mom and Aunt Eleanor. Not because they were directly responsible, but because I knew they'd talk. I wanted everyone to see it clearly. This time, there would be no euphemisms, no softening, no polite phrasing like just a gentle nudge. Nothing gentle about it. I'd carried the weight of this family long enough. The reactions came fast. My mom texted first. No questions, no acknowledgement of the money. Just a single crying emoji and the line, I didn't think you were that kind of person. I didn't respond. I sat there looking at that message like it came from a stranger. I had once been her daughter, but only when I was compliant, quiet, and handing over my wallet without a word. The moment I said enough, I stopped being her daughter. That's all I needed to understand how conditional her love really was. Jack called immediately after. 5 calls in a row. I didn't pick up. The last message came in, long, rambling, and so predictable I could almost recite it before I read it. You're always like this. So sensitive. Why can't we just sit down and talk like family? Why make it such a big deal? It's always the same. When they mess up, I'm too sensitive. When they owe me, I'm petty. When I stay silent, I'm cold. And when I speak up, I'm the one tearing the family apart. I placed my phone face down on the table. No reply. No explanation. No repeating the same tired loop I'd been caught in my entire life. On Wednesday morning, I got a notification from the bank, $4,000 had been deposited into my account. The sender was my father. Not Jack. And no one left a note or an apology. Just an empty memo line. A few minutes later, I got a message from Jack. Just 2 words, we're square. I stared at those words and felt nothing. No relief. No satisfaction. No anger. No joy. Just emptiness. Maybe because, for once, I had allowed myself to hope, just a little, that I'd receive something more than a transaction. A simple acknowledgement. A sliver of respect. But they couldn't give me that. Because in their eyes, I had never been someone with feelings. I was a machine that fixed things. A walking wallet. A backup plan. A she only when convenient, otherwise, a thing. But at least this time, I had done something I'd never had the courage to do before. I said no. I set a deadline. I forced them to return what they once assumed they could take without permission. Not because I needed the money, but because I needed to know that no one gets to assign my worth for me anymore. And when you're firm enough, sometimes your silence becomes the loudest voice in the room. I didn't write that email in one sitting. It took me 3 days, writing, deleting, rewriting, not because I wasn't ready, but because I wanted every word to be airtight. No wiggle room, no opening for a hey, just checking in text pretending to care but really just testing the waters. I started by listing every account I had ever put in my name for them. Not the mental lists I used to recite in my head, not the scattered sticky notes on my fridge, but a detailed, cold breakdown: electricity for the cabin, my name, internet contract, my name, property insurance, under my name since 2015, after Dad's credit was cut. I remembered every midnight call asking for login info. Every time Jack said, "I'm swamped, can you just handle this real quick? I'll pay you back tomorrow," and how tomorrow never came. I wrote clearly in the email, all the accounts listed above have been cancelled. As of now, there are no remaining financial connections between me and any family member. No ranting. No justifications. No need. My final sentence was short, simple, and perfectly clear: I'm no longer the one carrying the load. Then I hit send. It was 1:12 a.m. The apartment was so quiet I could hear the soft ticking of the wall clock. I sat there for a long time afterward. No music. No tea. Just me, my hands resting on the table. My heart didn't feel lighter, but it also didn't feel heavy anymore. Something in me had shut. Not a door. A chapter. I didn't expect a reply. And I was right, none came that day. No group chat. No emojis. Not even a half-hearted, "Why would you do this?" They were silent. The kind of silence that only comes from people who know that if they speak now, they'll have to face a truth they've spent years pretending not to see: that they needed me, and I was no longer there. 2 days later, there was a knock on the door. I was in the kitchen, hands still wet from washing dishes. At first, I thought it was a neighbor. Then came the second knock, firmer, more urgent. I dried my hands, stepped into the hallway, and peeked through the peephole. It was Jack. He looked different, wearing a faded gray hoodie, hair a little messy, far from the polished version of himself he usually posted on social media. He was holding a paper bag, probably with a 6-pack of cheap beer. I opened the door, not to welcome him, but because I needed to face him. Needed to finish this. "I'm not here to fight," he said the moment I cracked the door open. His voice was lower than usual, missing its usual cockiness. "I know, you're mad. But we're siblings, right? Can't we just talk? You didn't have to cut everything like that." I stood there, not inviting him in. The door stayed ajar, just wide enough to let the breeze through, with me blocking the threshold. "Siblings don't treat each other like ATMs," I said, my voice calm, so calm, I barely recognized it as mine. "You say we should talk. But for the past 10 years, every talk ends with, 'Can you help me out?' So tell me, what's left to talk about?" He looked at me for a moment, blinking fast like he was searching for some old version of me he remembered, the one who was easy to persuade, easy to soften, easy to silence. But I wasn't there anymore. I looked him in the eye, and not angry, not sentimental, just fully aware of the space now between two people who used to call each other family. "If you need something, figure it out," I said. Like I always did. Then I gently pushed the door. "And don't come back unless what you bring isn't just another promise." The door closed. No pounding. No shouting apologies. Just the soft scuff of his shoes walking away, then silence. I stood with my back against the door for a long time. No tears. No shaking. No sense of triumph. Just one simple truth I had taken 35 years to learn: not responding is still a response. And sometimes, it's the only one that matters. I always thought the most painful part of a family relationship was being forgotten. But then I realized, no, the real pain is being seen clearly, being openly used, and still being treated like you're invisible. And sometimes, truth arrives from the most unexpected person. For me, it came from a woman I never thought would take my side. It was a Saturday morning. I was reviewing the final version of the cabin sale contract, reading through every line one last time before sending it to the attorney's office. The sky was clear, the breeze soft, the apartment quiet, like the world itself was giving me space to close a chapter in peace. Then the doorbell rang. I walked over, looked through the peephole, and froze for a second. It was Amanda, Jack's girlfriend. I opened the door without saying anything. She stepped in, both hands gripping her purse, her makeup subtle but her eyes red and puffy. She sat down, glancing around like she needed a few more seconds to believe this was really happening. Then she started. "I found the cabin paperwork," she said. "In Jack's desk drawer. Everything was in your name." I read it all. The bank records, the insurance, the taxes. Everything. "It's been you, since 2009. I didn't react. Didn't flinch. Didn't sigh. I just sat there, listening, as if someone had hit play on a recording I'd heard so many times in my head. The truth, finally being spoken aloud. "Jack told me, it was a family property," Amanda continued, her voice getting quieter. "That he was the one on the deed. That he took care of it, paid for everything." I believed him. I was proud, honestly. Every time we went up there, I felt like I was part of something he built. I posted pictures, told friends, my boyfriend's the kind of guy who handles things. And then I found out it was all a lie. She pulled a folder from her bag, worn pages, dog-eared corners, bound with a rubber band. I saw my name, clearly printed, on every page. The purchase contract. The first loan statements. The insurance policy. Tax receipts. No mention of Jack. Not a single line. "I'm not here to stir things up," Amanda said, her voice trembling now. "I just wanted to say thank you. For keeping that place together all those years. I'm sorry for believing the lie, for sitting in that cabin like it belonged to someone else. And I wanted you to know, I left him. I can't stay with someone who builds entire stories just to make himself look good." She stood up, placed the folder on my coffee table, and looked at me one last time before heading to the door. "You're not invisible," she said. "And I hope, from now on, you never let anyone treat you like you are." When the door closed, I sat still for a long time. The folder lay there, quiet, solid, undeniable. A witness. For years, I'd lived in that cabin as the caretaker, the financier, the one who stepped back so others could step forward. And whenever anyone mentioned it, they'd say the family cabin, never Rachel's place. But it was me who kept the bank from foreclosing. Me who drove 3 hours to fix a broken water pump. Me who hung the photos, replaced the bulbs, patched the wood rot. Not because I enjoyed sacrificing. But because I once believed, if I was good enough, quiet enough, they'd remember me. They remembered the cabin. They forgot the person who kept it standing. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. I transferred $20,000 straight into my parents' joint account. No note. No subject line. No need for acknowledgement. It was the fair share from the cabin sale. Even though every document was in my name. Even though I had covered every cost on my own. I sent the money not to please them, but to know, for myself, that I owed them nothing. The cabin officially sold early the following week. I received an email from the law office confirming the transfer was complete. I didn't go back one last time. It wasn't necessary. Everything I needed to take, I'd already taken. And everything that needed to be left behind, the fake memories, the role I never willingly accepted, I left it all. I moved out of Houston a few days later. Bought a small house in the hills north of Austin. No sign out front. No ties to anyone. Just me, a few old belongings, a sunlit kitchen, a reading chair by the window, and a backyard where, for the first time in my life, I could plant something without fear of someone else trampling it. On my first morning in the new house, I sat sipping coffee, watching sunlight filter through the trees. No phone ringing. No group chat messages. No questions like, "Can you help with this?" For the first time, I felt light. Not light as in letting something go, but light because I finally knew I didn't have to carry anything that wasn't mine anymore. And if someone were to ask me what I lost through all of this, I'd say, I lost nothing. I simply reclaimed the part of my life they thought belonged to them. And this time, I'm keeping it for myself. 3 months isn't a long time if you're waiting for someone to come back. But it feels like forever if you've spent every day expecting some kind of noise, whether it's a request, a guilt trip, or just a meme from a group chat you never really belonged in. Those 3 months passed like someone had turned off the volume on my entire life. No one called. No one checked in. No messages asking if I was okay, no calls about bills that needed reviewing, no "it's all in the past, let's move on" texts. Nothing. At first, I thought the silence was temporary. I'd learned their emotional cycle well, first anger, then confusion, then blame, then reconciliation. I had played the role of emotional sponge more times than I could count, never once getting a proper apology. But this time was different. No one came back. No one tried to fix things. There was no sign that anyone wanted to reopen the door I had firmly closed. They disappeared, not because they'd changed, but because they didn't know how to face a version of me they no longer controlled. I used to think silence was frightening. That if no one needed me, if no one called, I must be alone. But I came to see, it was their noise that wore me down. And this silence was gentler than I imagined. I no longer woke up with the pressure of checking my phone for emergencies I was expected to handle. I didn't wonder how to scrape together money to cover someone else's forgotten bill. I no longer drafted emails to smooth over mistakes made by grown adults who still acted like children. Now, every morning starts with the sound of boiling water in the kettle, sunlight pouring through the glass, and a to-do list that only has my name on it. I garden. I read. I cook, not because someone's coming over, but because I want my dinners to be worth looking forward to. Some days, I blast music and dance alone in the kitchen. Other days, I sit for hours watching the light shift on the walls as the sun sets. I'm not trying to stay busy. I'm just living, in a way I was never allowed to live before. Dylan was the only one who remained in my world. My cousin, 16 years old, skinny, quiet, with a look in his eyes I'd never seen in any of the adults in our family, a look of someone who truly listens. Every month, Dylan would ride his bike over and invite me out for burgers. No probing questions. No pushing for me to talk. Some days, the two of us would just sit there, chewing fries, staring out at the street, saying nothing. But once, as I bit into a still warm burger, Dylan placed his hand on the table, looked straight at me, and said, "I get it." Just 3 words. No explanation needed. But I knew he really did. Because he'd never laughed when the others made me the punchline. Because he never waited until I was useful to be kind. Because he didn't need a reason to choose my side. One early autumn afternoon, as I was reorganizing the bookshelf in my living room, I found a postcard slipped under the doorframe. No envelope. No return address. The front showed a photograph of a lake at sunset, sunlight spilling purple and orange across still water, eerily similar to the lake near the old cabin. On the back, there was only one small, handwritten sentence, carefully penned but unfamiliar: "We should have done better. You deserved better." No name. No signature. No clue who had sent it. It could have been my mother. Or Jack. Or someone in the family who had stayed quiet long enough to see me be pulled under without ever speaking up. Or maybe it was a stranger, someone who saw a version of me in a story, in a post, and decided to send the apology that no one else ever did. I held that postcard for a long time. Not emotional. No tears. But something softened in me, not because I forgave, but because I realized I had come so far, I didn't need an apology to move forward anymore. I didn't throw it away. I didn't display it on the table like a trophy either. I quietly tucked it into a small drawer, next to old notes and keepsakes I no longer used. Not to hold on to the past, but to remind myself, some doors need to be closed. Not locked. Not barricaded. Just closed, firmly enough that I won't be pulled back through them again. Freedom doesn't arrive with shouting, arguments, or victory laps. It arrives when you learn how to be alone without feeling incomplete. When you stop giving just to prove you matter to others. When you choose yourself without guilt. And when you realize, the silence you once feared is the only place where your voice is fully heard. No one interrupts. No one scoffs. No one asks, "Why are you making such a big deal?" My freedom wasn't loud. But it was real. And it was enough. So what about you? Have you ever lived in a relationship where you were always the one carrying, trying, enduring, just to keep everything from falling apart? Have you ever given, not because you didn't need it, but because you thought, if I don't do it, no one else will? And have you ever been called selfish, cold, too sensitive, just because you finally stood up and said, enough? I don't know where you are in your journey. Maybe you're still holding things together to keep the peace. Maybe you're still drafting that apology for something that wasn't your fault. Maybe you're still hoping that if you're just a little better, stay quiet one more time, give a little more, people will change, will appreciate you, will finally love you the right way. If you're there, I understand. I lived a lifetime believing that too. But you know what? Some places never change, no matter how much you sacrifice. Some people only know how to love you when you're useful. And some relationships, if you don't step out of them, you'll be forever swallowed by the role they've written for you. Not because you weren't good enough, but because you were too quick to forgive. Too willing to stay. Too used to being the ground others walk on. It took me over 30 years to understand this. Kindness does not mean letting others walk all over you without a trace of shame. Love is not one-sided. And family, if it only exists when you're paying the price, is not love. It's a transaction. And with any transaction, you have every right to walk away the moment you realize you're at a loss. Leave a comment. Tell me about the moment you chose to stop, even if it was just a quiet little no. Tell me how long it took you to realize that you don't have to be the most useful person in someone's life just to be allowed to stay in it. Because maybe, just maybe, your story will be the key that helps someone else realize this. No one is born to be someone's dumping ground for expectations, emotional landfill, or personal ATM, no matter what title that person holds, even if it's family. And if no one's ever told you this before, let me be the first. You deserve to be loved without paying for it. You deserve to exist without carrying the weight. And you have every right to choose again, your life, your boundaries, and yourself.